Right. Good evening and welcome to the July 2022 regular meeting of the Holland City Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Cathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Present.
Freeman.
Present.
Peters. Here. Corbin. Here. Coronado. Here. Arnshorst.
Here.
Hoekstra. Raymond. Here. Mayor Box.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to begin this evening's meeting as we have for many years, first with an opening prayer, followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we would invite you to join us if you're so inclined. Please pray with me if you're inclined. Lord, thank you for a wonderful day in the midst of a wonderful summer season with so many activities going on. So much to see, so much to do, and so much business to attend to. Lord, give us patience, give us ears to hear, give us wisdom to discern. Let us do your work and the people's work. Let us engage with one another civilly, and let us work hard to move this community forward in a way that is pleasing to you. In your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda are our consent agenda items. These are items that are considered to be fairly routine. They have been reviewed by council as part of our council packet, and they will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the audience or a member of City Council asks to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed in its regular order on our regular agenda. But before I ask for that, Cathy, would you please review the consent agenda for us?
4A, absences excused. 4B, meeting minutes approval. July 6th regular meeting, July 13th, 2022 study session. 4D, written petitions and communications, tax abatement PA 198, Forged by Design, LLC. 4E, Holland Board of Public Works, resolution authorizing transfer of funds for contribution to the city fiscal year 2023. 4F, Holland Board of Public Works, electric easements for Lakewood Boulevard Road reconstruction. 4G, Holland Board of Public Works, electric distribution hybrid bucket truck and digger derrick truck purchase. 4H, Holland Board of Public Works, contract award and budget transfer for secondary clarifiers 3 and 4 replacement. 4I, Planning Commission, dwelling place rezoning request, final adoption August 3rd, 2022. 4J, Planning Commission, rezoning 100 West 9th Street, 227 and 231 Pine Ave, and 99 West 10th Street from FCDT to FCNT. Final adoption August 3, 2022. 4K, Planning Commission, rezoning request for 5332 147th Street. Final adoption August 3, 2022. 4L, City Clerk, claims filed against the city. 4M, Community and Neighborhood Services, text amendments to Chapter 26, final adoption August 3, 2022. 4N, Finance, debit management policy. 4O, Finance, fund balance policy. 4P, Finance, fund balance implementing procedure, except as information. 4Q, Finance, economic development, Lakeshore Advantage funding agreement. 4R, Finance, Parks and Recreation, award bid for court resurfacing at Moran Park. 4S, Public Safety Services, approval of agreement for taser devices with Axon Enterprise, Inc. 4T, Internal Services, Technology Service, approved purchase of VLA Adobe Acrobat Standard, DC. 4U, Internal Services, Technology Services, replacement and addition network services.
Great. Thank you, Cathy. Is there any member of the audience that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none. Any member of council that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none there either. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the consent agenda?
Move to approve consent agenda as presented.
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Coronado. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd,
Yes.
Vreeman,
Yes.
Peters, Corbin,
Yes.
Coronado,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda, item 5, public comment. Under the Open Meetings Act of the State of Michigan, we provide the opportunity for public comment during all of our meetings. This is an opportunity for the public to speak to us. It is one-way communication. It is your opportunity to tell us what you are interested in. We do not engage in discussion, nor do we answer questions during this time period, but you may speak on any topic that you would like to. We do limit the time to 5 minutes. There are 3 lights on the dais, a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. The green light means you're doing well on time. The yellow light means you have 1 minute left, and the red light means that your time has expired, and we are strict about that. When you approach the podium, please state your name and the municipality in which you live. Having said that, is there anyone who would like to address council at this time? If so, please come forward. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Ann Henriksen, Zealand. It's been almost 3 years that I've been here at City Council talking on the same subject. And I am hoping that as time, 3 years, things have changed from the original ordinance, anti-discrimination. Things have changed in Holland. And as a city council, as I've watched you, you're very interested in change. You're very interested in moving forward with ordinances and accommodating the things that are current. We'll go there. There are things that have changed since the original ordinance. And the public and what has happened in Holland has come to the surface again and again and again. So it's time again to address something that has changed. I applaud you for doing what you do and looking forward to improve our community. The purpose of government is to protect the citizens. So that's what I'm here for. Things have shifted, and I want to talk a little bit about what has happened, especially in the sexual orientation movement. It is a movement, and we have an ordinance, anti-discrimination, and anybody can find it. Look at DEI, it has changed names, and it has grown. It's now a county accommodation for Ottawa County, and this is what I want to talk about. I've addressed it in the past, and I want to talk about it again. The public needs to go to the health department and see sex education and why it's important, not for schools, but for parents. And it's addressed completely for that. It makes sense that the health department would accommodate health education, sex education, for parents to discuss that with their children. And it's very well done. Yeah, it's long and inclusive, and it includes LGBT. Now we're talking children. We're talking children in school as well. Education, Herrick Library, public accommodations in the city that you are aware of. You're not on those boards. But on the other hand, this ordinance, sexual orientation, that word is a movement, and now it's into children. It's not about your neighbor and who they are and what they do. It's not about that. And it's not about employment anymore, nor is it about accommodations anymore. Now it's about children, and it's educating children. I showed you an article, I gave it to you actually, I think I did, about in the Sentinel that said that children need to be educated. They need to have safety in their sexual education and their actions. They need to be taught how to be sexually active and protected. They need safe sex, is what it said in the article. Well, now Ottawa County has a direction for parents. Schools are doing the same thing. And if you read all the way down through the whole list of what the health, do it, all the way down to see what is accommodating all sexual behavior, now that we have an ordinance that protects it, see who put that out, Planned Parenthood. And I would like to send you something, it's called Problematic Women. And for you to look into what sex education takes care of. Planned Parenthood is just safety. They're just showing kids a better way. Oh yeah, where is this leading? Where is this leading to? Look at the reading materials as well. I'm almost finished. I'm just asking you, improving and looking at what you have as an ordinance. Did you know you have a sexual-orientated business ordinance? Read that. It's quite graphic. Sexual orientation, same language. We're headed in a direction that I'm not sure that's what you meant. I would believe, as what I have seen of you and know of you as a council, fine people, good people here working hard for our community. Is this really where you want the direction to go to? That's what I want to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
My name is Martha Capistani, and I'm from Holland. And I'd like to say this is a little difficult for me. It's something I'm not comfortable doing. So you don't know anything about me, so I'm going to share a little bit at first. I've been in sports my whole life, coaching and teaching young kids through adults. It has also given me opportunities to perform for fun lip syncs and karaoke at various conferences and gatherings. I'm not good at karaoke, but I can do a mean Cher impersonation of I Got You, Babe, if you want to hear it. So that's a little bit about me. Now, I do have some comments and concerns regarding Pride Month. I picked up the brochure in downtown Holland to learn what was happening, and I hope to attend some of the events. However, I wasn't able to do so, so I hope to be able to do so next year. I was glad to see that there was an 18-plus age restriction on the adult comedy show and the drag performance, and I hope that remains in the future. However, as I was looking through the Sentinel about past events, I came across an article about a drag brunch at the Civic Center a couple years ago. It did have an 18-plus age restriction, but for some reason, 15 minors were allowed to attend on a first-come, first-served basis. It didn't make sense to me to have an age restriction and then allow in some random number of minors to attend. Now, I did not attend this, so I don't know if there were young children present or not, but I am concerned that it was portrayed that way at all. Unfortunately, this year, many events during Pride Month in various cities devolved into overtly sexual and inappropriateness during parades, concerts, and shows, and these were where children were present. And many of these events were deemed as family-friendly. One instance happened in the city of Dallas at a gay drag bar, and it was promoted something to the effect of drag your kids to brunch and it was family-friendly. I don't want to go into detail. You can look online if you want to see what happened. There's plenty of videos out there. It was inappropriate, and it was very uncomfortable to watch. But we need to know what's going on. All right? So that's just one example of something that happened. Now, we know that our children are over-sexualized and exploited at a very young age in so many ways today. They are extremely impressionable and often cannot process or understand what they are seeing. This is tough for me. I can't understand why seeing large human men dressed provocatively in women's clothing with fake female parts, extreme makeup, male parts packed away is something for young children. I find it to be strange, as I'm sure they would be, confusing and scary at the same time. And even as I say that out loud, that vision in my head of this and then this, it's just wrong, and it just doesn't go together. I also came across a statement in an article that I found disconcerting. Recently, our state attorney general, Dana Nessel, made an off-color remark about having drag queens in all our schools. I think she was kidding. But if you don't know, there are already states that are bringing drag queens into libraries and schools. Drag is sexual in nature, with sexual themes exhibited throughout. And I hope in our city and state that we keep this adult performance art where it belongs, in clubs, and not in our libraries or our schools. We don't go out of our way to have burlesque story hour or brunches. We don't have exotic dancer story hour or brunches. And we don't advocate for porn star story hour or brunches. My hope is that as we continue in the future with Pride Month in Holland, that appropriate boundaries remain in effect for family-friendly events and age restrictions remain in effect for all adult entertainment. We can already see how these things have devolved over time. And my hope is that as we continue in the future with Pride Month, we have the appropriate boundaries, we keep the things age appropriate, but most of all, we need to make sure that our Holland families and their values are respected and protected as much as anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
My name is Doug Zylstra. My municipality is the City of Holland. I am the Ottawa County Commissioner for the City of Holland. I just want to catch you all up on where Ottawa County is with our American Rescue Plan process. I believe last time I was here, we talked about the 5 buckets, and that we have now signed contracts for 3 of the buckets. The county initiatives and county broadband will be managing in-house. Lakeshore Advantage is one of the bucket managers, Care Ottawa County, and Housing Next. These 3 managers will be in charge of business revitalization, health and social services, and affordable housing, respectively. And I am, pleased to announce that we now have direct contacts for these areas. Anyone interested in submitting a project or talking through the process of submitting a project can find the respective information on our American Rescue Plan webpage at MyOttawa/ARPA plan. At the site, you can also find our specifically designated ARP survey, where residents and stakeholders can better inform our ARP process by letting us know your priorities. It is our intention to begin our first round of funded projects starting in September, and it is our hope to incorporate citizen input into that round, as well as the second round starting next summer. Because of the manner in which we've appropriated our funds, there is not necessarily an end date to our funding process, but we do intend to fund projects and invest in our community both intentionally and expeditiously. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out at dsilstra@myottawa.org. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda, item 8, unfinished business, traffic change, no parking sign on Quarter Line Road.
Motion to untable item 8A.
Moved by Corbin. Is there support to remove it from the table? That came from Aaronstors. Any discussion? Kathy, do we need a roll call on this or just a voice vote to remove it from the table? I can't recall. Okay, we'll do a voice vote on this then. All those in favor of removing it from the table say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item is removed from the table. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Brian White is with us tonight, and he usually walks through these. As he's coming up, I'll just remind you all on the process, and for those that are here or watching at home, basically as this process is, this was on the table because we put in a recommendation that comes from the Traffic Control Committee, and then you announce it basically. We put that out to the local community to see if there's any input, and then that's when Brian comes back and makes the presentation and talks about if there was any feedback or input from the community. So Brian, go ahead and I'll steer the ship over here for you. I think that's the map you were looking for, right?
It is, yes. Okay, thank you, Keith. Good evening, Mayor Box, council members, members of the public. As Keith indicated, the item before you tonight is related, or comes from the Traffic Committee. It's related to traffic changes along our road network. Specifically, what we're looking at here is on Quarter Line Road, basically east city limit along 16th Street. On Quarter Line itself, we've been asked the recommendation or request came from the Quarter Line Crossings Homeowner Association that's back there off of Quarter Line. But the request is along the west side of Quarter Line that we post no parking for a section of that street, basically from 16th Street back just beyond, I think it's Beacon Light Circle, but it's the private drive into the new Quarter Line or Shoreline Flats apartments there right on the corner. The picture shows it best. So there's some black X's there where we would post no parking on the west side of Quarter Line. And so that's the request before you tonight, that we go ahead and do that. Assuming that that meets with approval, then we'll go ahead and post accordingly with some signage.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Any questions for Brian?
Yeah, I just have.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Are you going to post them the length of Quarter Line up to the?
Yeah, no, we're just gonna go about 50 feet north of that private drive into the apartments.
So you're not worried, well, you must not be worried that people are just going to shift to the other end.
Yeah, no, and again, it has to do with the layout there. There's
Okay.
actually a 3-lane. Now, we've made some improvements to the intersection at Adams that I think this will help kind of finalize that road alignment through there. So, yeah, I think it'll be in good shape once we do that.
Yeah. Nikki?
So no one objected. Who was parking then? I mean, who were?
I don't know exactly who was parking. I actually was just out there this afternoon, and there wasn't anyone parking there at the time. There was a few additional cars further to the north, but there's really not a lot of traffic there, just because there's not a lot going on once you get beyond that first driveway there. So I think what we're doing here, measured approach. If we need to do more, we certainly can, but I think this is a good step, and it as I said, it lines up with the road alignment and what we did there right at the intersection of 16th Street. So I'm assuming, based on the input that we received from the homeowners association, that there was at some point some parking that was going on there, and so that's what we're responding to.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Belinda.
So my question is, what came about? I mean, was it a hazard, was it getting
Yeah.
bottlenecked? What was the main issue?
Yeah, so I think it was
concern, Brian?
so I think it was a line of sight issue. So exiting motorists from the apartment drive, and then traffic, particularly southbound traffic on Quarter Line. So.
Yep. Anyone else? Great. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yep.
What is the pleasure of council in regard to the traffic change, no parking sign on Quarter Line Road?
Move
to-
Oops, go ahead. Move to approve,
Moved by Coronado,
and I will support that.
support by Ernst. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Freeman.
Yes.
Peters. Corbin. Coronado.
Yes.
Arnshorst.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Byrd. Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda, written petitions and communications. In addition to providing a public comment period at all of our meetings, we do also have an email address that you can send comments to City Council. We all receive those and review those in between our regular meetings. And then we accept them into the record at our regular meetings. We do not read them out loud at the meetings, but we do all read them as part of our preparation for the meetings. We have multiple items that came into and I should state the email address so that everybody knows what it is, publiccomment@cityofholland.com. Again, that's publiccomment@cityofholland.com. We have several of them this week, and what is the pleasure of council in regard to the written petitions and communications?
Move that we enter the public comments into the record.
Moved by Ernst. Any support?
Support.
Support by Coronado. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item 10A, Proposed Unified Development Ordinance, UDO, number 4 text amendments. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So we have on the, I'm going to kind of just do a context thing here. The next 3 items are all items that have already gone through first reading. And just for our recollection and for those that might be watching at home, when we do an ordinance, there's a first reading that's kind of a notification. You had several of them on your consent agenda tonight. That just notifies the community that you're potentially preparing to take action on something. That first reading is just that notification. It moves it on to the second reading. With this UDO, you know that we've been going through a process where several times we also have a study session where we give you kind of the rundown of what is potentially being proposed. It's also been through Planning Commission. So this item, the proposed text amendments for UDO, and we're starting to number them now. You've caught on to that. So this is group number 4. These are at the final step. Sorry for that. So it'd be prepared for your action tonight, should you so choose to do that. A little bit later on in the agenda, you're going to have the first step in the UDO, and Steve's going to be back up and talk you through that tonight. So that maybe sets the stage a little bit so Steve can jump right into what is included in these proposed text amendments for UDO number 4.
Thank you, Keith. So we have started numbering them just to sort of keep them straight, so hopefully that makes sense to you guys too. So UDO 4, as Keith has mentioned, you have already seen this at the study session, so just quickly to get through this, I describe these changes. There are a bunch of corrections, clarifications, some of the stuff that we have been going through and doing already. And then there is, I guess what I'm describing is 3 a little bit more substantial changes. So I'll certainly identify those as we go through here. What you see on these first couple slides, in the TNR zoning district, we have essentially treated that zoning district a little bit different on how we treat corner lots. So we really want to get rid of that special treatment and just treat the TNR lots like we do all of the other zoning districts in terms of corner lots. That really came out of an old variance that was done, and it just seems like it's a little bit better procedure if we just treat it like everybody else, since it really doesn't come up very often. That's the first couple of changes there. And then you just have on the bottom of that page on the left, you just have some references that are being added. On the page on the right, I know it's all in red. I'm not calling that a substantial change. It's really just a clarification to let people know when permits required. So this gets into a little bit more of some of the more substantial changes. But first, this first page on the left side is that use chart that you're used to seeing. And we are adding campgrounds in there. Sorry, I'm going to use my. So we're not adding campgrounds to the ordinance, but we already have a line for campgrounds. We're just changing a little bit of how we treat them. So right now, campgrounds are a special use in 2 of the zoning districts and are permitted use in the open space district. We want to change them to all special uses. And you notice there's also the asterisk on there, so that means there's some standards that come along with that. So right now for campgrounds, we don't have any standards. So when we put it in the ordinance and we develop the standards, that's really why you have the star on it, the little asterisk, and then we're just keeping it in the same zoning district. So same zoning districts, just a little bit different in terms of the process, so it'll be a special use. And that's really what you see on that next page there, is just adding the campground in the table. And then these are the standards that we developed for campgrounds. As I mentioned before, we simply didn't have standards. So we had a use that allowed for campgrounds, but then we didn't have any standards. So this is what we developed, kind of taking a look at what the state and what some of the other communities around have. And so we developed these criteria if somebody wanted to put in a campground. I think somebody asked at study session what that would do to any existing campgrounds, making them legal, non-conforming. We don't have any campgrounds, so it doesn't treat anybody, it doesn't put anybody in that grandfathered status or legal non-conforming. So again, kind of some of the clarifications that you've been seeing on that left page in the industrial outlot development, there's some minimum standards. We have a minimum of 10,000 square foot lot and a maximum of 1 acre. The graphic is correct. In the text part of that, you can see they both say minimum. So we're simply changing the text to match the graphic. So there's a minimum and maximum for that lot size. Page on the right is the airport overlay, and we simply wanted to add a key at the bottom. You can see it in red there, so people would know that P means it's permitted, the dash means that it's not permitted. It was probably really intuitive for everybody, but we simply just didn't have any kind of key so people would know what those symbols meant. So I've got a bunch of pages in here to update different sections of our ordinance, really as a result of the West Rock development. I didn't realize when we did that rezoning that there was other pages that would have to be updated. So this isn't something that you would see moving forward. But as we were doing this round of amendments, I thought it would be helpful just to make sure it was clear that all of these sections would also be amended as a result. So that's really what you see happening with all of these different map pages. This is the table in the form-based district. You can see there's a couple edits on there. Just making sure that we have the same setback and for the same zoning district that we mentioned in other places. So I think it's down in the River, Michigan. You can see that kind of halfway down. We have a 10-foot minimum setback in this table, but it's 15 when you go to when you go further into the ordinance for that zoning district. So we just want to make sure it matches, so they would both be 15. On that right-hand side of that column in that waterfront downtown, that last column for maximum height, you can see we have 2, 4, and 6 stories for the maximum height. We simply don't need to list the 2 stories since that's the minimum, so we want to make that correction. And then finally, if you look at the north downtown in that same maximum column, you can see we have 6, 9, or 12 stories as our maximum height. And then the right, which is correct, and then on that right side of your page is the north downtown section where we only listed 6 stories, and so we just want to make that clarification. So in the graphic you can see that it's 6, 9, or 12, which would match the table. Definitely gonna have to. These are just some edits for the drive-through section, which is really just a clarification. Instead of just having the F district, which could imply that it would be all of the sub-districts, we simply wanted to spell out the sub-districts that allow for the drive-throughs. So that's really just a clarification by adding those sub-districts in there. Whoops. And then on that right-hand page is the edit for light levels. So in this section, we have 10-foot candles as being the maximum. When you go into our lighting section, we have 15 being the maximum level for foot candles, parking lot lights, those sorts of things, and 15 is what we should be at. So we simply want to make this correction and make sure both sections are the same. This is really, if the standards for campgrounds were what I described as that first substantive change, this is the second one, vehicle repair at residential properties. We're really wanting to add this into the document, really to provide some clarity so people know kind of what the expectations are, whether or not you're somebody who wants to work on your car, or maybe you're a neighbor who's concerned about somebody working on cars. So we're entering, in this section here, just kind of introducing that we're going to have standards. And then on that right side of the page, you can see we've developed the standards for the vehicle repair, which basically would probably be some things that you would really expect to see. These are supposed to be your vehicles. You know, the work is inside, no heavy equipment, you know, nothing stored outside, those sorts of things. So again, just providing that clarity so you and your neighbors would know what the expectations are. That's really what we describe as the second substantive change in this round. And then we just have some really clarifications where we're just adding in some language. It's already in the document, but because we're talking about driveways in particular in this section, we simply wanted to add that same language in there, that permits are required. So again, this isn't new. This is really just hopefully clarifying it by putting it in this section. And then on that, I cannot read that. And then we're just relettering as a result of that. Thank you, Tricia. 9.05, accessory structures requiring setbacks. Again, just kind of introducing or really just clarifying so people would know permits are required. And there's that reference to 1204 where it already is in the document. And then just some more relettering. Under fences, we just have the reference for where those regulations can also be found elsewhere in the ordinance. We've been doing that quite a bit. Definitions. So in the subdivision section of UDO, we have several definitions for plats or site condos or condominiums. But then in the definition section, we either didn't have definitions or they weren't the same definitions. So we simply want to put those in there so they're the same. So we'll just be using those definitions that you see circled there that are in our subdivision section and putting those in the definition portion of the document. The process, review process and approving authority tables. So this is the document that kind of tells people what process they're going to go through if they want to do something. So we have several different columns there, focusing on the zoning administrator, zoning permit process. You can see up in the text portion of that, we simply want to change that title so it matches a little bit more to what the table is. So it would be the zoning administrator review and permit process. And then on that right side, you can see we're making some changes, again, for projects that aren't going to the planning commission, don't have to come through city council, but maybe they're just reviewed by admin staff or just the zoning administrator. Only the projects that are reviewed by the admin review process get noticed for the neighbors. So it is possible if you didn't have to go to the planning commission and it only had to do administrative review, we send notices out. A neighbor could request that a project like that still be reviewed by the planning commission. For the zoning administrator projects, those do not get noticed. So we simply want to make sure it's clear in that table that it's that people understand that it's only for the admin reviews that we would send the notice out, not for the zoning administrator permit projects. And then you just see that repeated in other portions of the tables. For that zoning administrator review permit process, I know there is a lot of red on there. Describe this more as a clarification. This section, the way it's currently worded, blends a couple things together with the zoning administrator review process as well as Board of Appeals. So we really wanted to take out everything that didn't apply to the zoning administrator review process. And so that's why you see all the red there. I did provide the clean version for that on the left-hand side of the screen so you could see that looks a little bit easier on the eyes. And then finally, on the screen is the third substantial change that we're describing, which is the civil infraction process, or I should say just the penalty process. The way the ordinance is done right now, most of the document, it's a criminal misdemeanor, and then there are some civil infractions. We really thought it would be better to flip that, so most of the ordinance would be civil infractions, and then there still is a couple things that would be criminal misdemeanors. So most of the time, the stuff that we're dealing with, we're after, of course, compliance. It's not about writing tickets. And so we think this is a little bit more efficient way to get compliance, and certainly maybe a little bit more of a friendly way if we do have to go to court to have it go through the civil infraction rather than the criminal proceedings. That is Udo 4.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions from council members for staff? Mr. Corbett?
Yeah, could you just explain the steps for a special use permit to the audience, please?
So the steps aren't really that different, but you would have to go to the planning commission to get approval. Now, what the special use permit also brings with it are additional criteria that the planning commission would use in their evaluation of a project. So there's a little bit more discretion that the planning commission would have versus a project that's just permitted by right that that somebody could apply for.
So a special use permit is not administratively approved, it still has to go before the planning commission?
It has to go
correct?
before the planning commission.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Belinda?
Steve, I had a question about the civil infraction versus the criminal. So the civil infraction, what is the penalty, so you go before, who do you go before, or you just go pay your ticket at the police department, is that correct, or?
So I don't know if our attorney wants to weigh in on that, but typically, it'd be an administrative judge that you would go in front of.
Civil infractions can still be paid at the district court. It's just the district court staff would have the ordinance to inform them as to the amount of the civil infraction, but it could be paid there.
And is there like a penalty, like if they have like 30 days, what is it normally, 30 days and then it's a late, but there's never, it doesn't go like into suspension, like if it's it's a criminal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the same as, I mean, it's going to be controlled by the ordinance language for zoning. In traffic matters, you could have different consequences for not paying a civil infraction,
Right.
but here, the consequence is probably getting another civil infraction, and those could start mounting up. But
Right.
that would, the way the structure is there's no other consequences other than being liable for the civil infraction as directed.
And I guess I just question, like, sometimes we get a notice that our grass is too long, so will it be like, we're gonna come and cut it or whatever, or then you pay that fee, or what is the first penalty of getting your civil, what's a ticket, what would the first cost be once they get a?
Well, and it probably goes. Sure. I was just going to say, it probably goes without saying, we would still go through the same sort of enforcement proceedings, right? You get a letter or two before, so it's not an effort to write tickets.
Right.
Yeah.
When we issue a civil infraction ticket, there is a penalty in the administration section of our ordinance, I think chapter 2, that sets the level of the fine based on the severity of the violation. So if you left your garbage on your porch and refused to pick it up and we had to give you a ticket, that amount is less than if you had a broken window or a hazardous property condition and you refused to correct it and we had to write you a ticket. I think we just changed the fines a few months ago and increased them a level because it had been a long time since we changed the fee structure. I think for a class 1, the fine is $50, class 2 is $100, class 3 is $150 for the first offense. So the city charges a fine if we have to write a ticket, and the court charges a fine if we write a court ticket. If we write you a ticket, you don't take care of your violation, we write you a second ticket, and then we request a hearing with the magistrate. So it's usually with the magistrate, not with the judge, and then the court can impose additional conditions, restrictions, penalties. And if you don't pay your ticket, then you're in trouble with the court, and then they do the enforcement instead of us.
Thank you, Tricia.
Other questions for staff? Thank you, Steve, for going through that with us again. As the city manager said, there's a multi-step process for this. This went a couple of steps at Planning Commission, went through first reading with us, went through study session with us, and now is here for final adoption. I've seen it 5 times. But what's nice about that is it gives the public 5 different opportunities to be able to weigh in on these types of things as well. And as you mentioned, a couple of zoning recommendations that we're on for first reading tonight as well that have been through multiple steps in the process before a final decision is made. So it gets public the opportunity to be able to speak on those types of issues as well. Anything else from council members? What is the pleasure of council in regard to item 10A? The proposed Unified Development Ordinance number 4, set number 4 of text amendments.
Move to approve.
Moved by Coronado. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Raymond. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters? Yes. Corbin? Yes. Coronado?
Yes.
Arnsworth?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item, item 10B, text amendment to Chapter 6. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, I'm looking. I'm not sure who's taking. I think Tricia is taking this one. So Tricia's going to come up, and again, you've seen this in a first reading, but she's going to explain what we're looking to do to Chapter 6.
Thank you. So Chapter 6 is where we have the authority in the department I work for to enforce the building code. There were a lot of references in Chapter 6 to land use permits. Because of all the changes we're making in Udo, land use permits don't exist anymore. They're now called zoning permits. So as part of the Udo change process, we also need to change Chapter 6 so that everything matches and everything aligns. So that's the biggest change in Chapter 6 is we're changing the language from land use permits to zoning permits. And then the other thing we're doing, as we just talked about the penalties, we're moving all of the penalty stuff for the zoning permits out of Chapter 6 and putting it where it belongs in Chapter 39 with Udo. So that talks about the penalties, it talks about what things, Steve showed the clean copy of the list of things that are penalties or are civil infractions and do require permits. So we're just moving some things around so it makes a little bit better sense and flows better. And so our sections all match. Changing from land use to zoning, moving permit regulations to Chapter 39, and moving all of the enforcement for the zoning permits to Chapter 39 and taking them out of Chapter 6. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you. Questions for staff? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of council in regard to text amendments to Chapter 6? Moved by Freeman. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Coronado. Any discussion? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin? Yes. Coronado?
Yes.
Arnsworth?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Peters?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item, item 10C, text amendment to Chapter 19-12. Mr. Van Beek.
Tricia.
I think that's the most brief report you've ever given.
It's probably your favorite one.
So this is another Udo-related change. When we adopted Udo last year, we accidentally omitted clear vision corners for regular residential generally properties. So we do have clear vision corners in Udo as it relates to fences and projects that go to Planning Commission. But we occasionally receive complaints about traffic visibility. I can't see around the corner, somebody's hedges on their private property encroach too far, they limit visibility for both pedestrian traffic and vehicle traffic. So I talked with the city attorney's office and they recommended we add the clear vision corners into chapter 19. So 19 is our general nuisance section of the ordinance. So this is where you'll find the long grass violations, inoperable vehicles, dead trees, all kinds of other private property nuisance issues. So we added a lot of the language that's already in Udo to this section, just so that if we do have a problem where bushes are creating a visibility hazard, we have the authority to tell the homeowners that they need to trim them. And I have a couple of pictures. These are a couple frequent flyers. The one picture in the top right corner are bushes that are no longer exist at the corner of Ottawa and 29th Street behind the high school. We sent the owners so many letters, they eventually just pulled the bushes out. And then one of those other pictures is, I believe, on the corner of Central and 32nd Street, and then out off of South Shore Drive in Lugers is that bottom one. That bush also crops up every couple of years. So we just want to add that back into chapter 19 so that we don't have traffic visibility hazards.
Great. Questions for staff? I just have one. So say I've got a neighbor who has, say, a 6 to 8 foot high hedge on a corner lot. It's probably a good idea for them to trim that a couple of times a year.
If it's creating a visibility hazard, definitely.
Okay, great.
If you
for
need help, let
aesthetics.
us know.
Yeah, great. Any other comments from council? What is the pleasure of council in regard to text amendment to chapter 19-12?
Move to approve.
I'm going to give that one to Coronado. Moved by Coronado. Is there support? Is there support, Mr. Vreeman? Sure, there's support from Mr. Vreeman. Any discussion from council?
This one does come with penalties.
There's, yeah, for clarification, yes, there are big penalties if you don't trim your hedge, I think is what Tricia was getting at there. Any discussion from council members? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Coronado?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes?
Peters? Corbin? Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda, item 10D, Boards, Commissions, and Committees, dissolution of the CATV Advisory Commission. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, you will recall that we've gone through a multi-step process with the board, commission, and committee. We shorten that like government people do to the BCC report and recommendations. And as one of the recommendations in there was really to take a look at all of the existing boards, committees, and commissions that we have on the books. And the Cable TV Commission, Matt remembers very well because over a weekend, he basically, I've heard the story. He moved all of the equipment in here to City Hall. So this is a commission that hasn't met for like 10 years and 6 months or something like that. So this would be that process that would eliminate a commission that doesn't serve a purpose anymore and hasn't met for over 10 years.
Great, thank you. Questions for staff?
None too soon.
All right, what is the pleasure of council in regard to the dissolution of the CATV Advisory Commission? Moved by Vreeman, is there support?
Support.
Support by Coronado, any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd? Freeman?
Yes?
Peters? Corbin? Coronado?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item, item 12B1, well, it sounds familiar to me. Text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance. Introduction to the fifth set of amendments to the ordinance for proposed final adoption on August 3rd. Mr. Van Beek.
Mr. Peterson would love to go through group number 5.
Thank you. Yes, one last round tonight. So this set of amendments, probably a little bit more substantive again. I'm describing really three things going on here. Changing how we talk about public lodging, come up with a new definition of shelter and care facility. So those are kind of the three things going on. Everything else kind of falls into place as a result of that. So this first page on the left-hand side of your screen is the public lodging section that we have right now. Public lodging right now handles both sort of the hotel type use as well as shelter. So the idea is to really separate those two. So public lodging now would become hotel. And that's why we have a new definition, a new section for shelter as a result of that. And then cleaning up this section, you can see there in that paragraph 1, adding RMU and GMU. Those are districts where public lodging is already permitted. We just want to keep it listed in that line of uses. Getting rid of the additional review process. And then more substantial to that is getting rid of that minimum square footage of 250 square feet and the requirement of no more than 30 days. Again, this would be for just hotels now. And then striking out the shelters would be considered as a public lodging because we have coming up with a new definition for shelter, which is really what you kind of see going on that right-hand side of your screen. Is again that table that we use for all of the uses. So about halfway down, you can see that we are taking out or just really renaming nursing homes and adding care facilities. We wanted to have a little broader definition rather than just nursing homes. So care facility would be a little bit more than nursing home. So I think in our new definition, we use examples of nursing home, home for the aged, convalescent home, rehab clinic, those sorts of things. So the idea was that the nursing home line would change to care facilities to be able to capture all of those sorts of uses rather than have new rows for all of those similar type of uses. And then what you see going on in the zoning districts is we're keeping all of the same we're keeping them in all of the same zoning districts, using all of the same procedures in terms of, permitted use or special use, with the exception of in the HDR district. You can see we're kind of using a slash there, a P*/S. And so the idea was that it would be a permitted use with standards, that's the asterisk again, for up to 20 occupants. So up to 20, you could, in the HDR, you'd be a permitted use. More than that, you would be a special use. Other than that, the rest of the zoning districts are treated the same way that we treated nursing homes. And then public lodging, you can see, stays the same. So again, that was already the district that we used for hotel use, so that is staying the same. And we're adding the shelter use and simply really mirroring the same in terms of zoning districts and process, the same thing. So P* for everybody in shelters. So public lodging had both the hotel use as well as the shelter use before, so we broke that apart, but we kept it the same in terms of the process. Sorry, I know that was a long, lengthy explanation, but kind of everything else falls together as a result of those. So on the left-hand side of your screen is the definition that we came up with for shelter. Use the royal we there. I thank Lynn Raymond for her help with that. So I won't read that to you, but that was the definition that the Planning Commission came up with as a result of the process already. I would tell you in the Planning Commission's review of it, the first go-round, they said, hey, go back, do some more work. So this was, as you were describing earlier, with everybody getting a shot at some of these amendments, this has already sort of been through a little bit of that meat grinder as well. Then you have the definition of care facility in there. We strike the definition of nursing home. I just feel like it's not needed now that it's being captured in care facility. And then there is just one small, really what we think is just a clarification to the adult foster care definition by adding some language that these are typically licensed by the state. And again, as I say, with those changes, the rest of this stuff is really just the result of what we've already talked about. So the HDR table changes with that care facility. There's that threshold of the up to 20, so you know which one's permitted, which one is special use. And then on the CMU, adding the care facility, CMU adding the shelter. So really, that's just kind of what you see happening with all of those districts where both the care facility or the shelter is being introduced into those. And then really just, again, mimicking the language that was already in there. I think the industrial section, that's just a typo on our part. That should really read the same, that the language is in there for public lodging already. So everything would be the exact same the way it is treated today. And then again, just sort of introducing those uses, the care facility, the shelter where they need to be. You can see then introducing that at the end of 4.02, those would be where the standards would get inserted into the document. And that's really what you see on the screen there on your left-hand side are the standards for both the care facility and the shelter. That is a really quick UDO 5.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Questions for staff? And at this stage, we're not looking at any action on this. That'll come later in the agenda. This is the report from the board, committee, or commission, similar to what we did in the study session a week or so ago in regard to the round 4 of the UDO amendments, correct?
Yeah, and what we're proposing with this one, unless council would like to see anything different, is not taking this to a study session in between, but then that you would just see this on
August
for final action on August 2, I think.
3.
Yep. All right. Questions from council?
We'd like to see it again.
Could we do a study session, maybe a full, so we get a sixth
I
bite at the apple with this one?
I sensed intonation in the voice where I believe that the next time you'll see this is on August 3.
All right.
Sounds good.
Well, except we will be seeing it at item 16A if we approve it for first
Right,
reading,
right.
correct? All right. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. Great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Next item on our agenda, communications from the city manager. Mr. Van Beek.
Gifts.
Oh, gifts. I'm sorry. Passed right over that. Gifts. Kathy, would you please review the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts. Downtown Group, Windmill Island Gardens, Dawn M. Safford, $25. Susie and Rudy Windovell, $25. Whatavell?
Vitaville.
I don't know.
Vitaville.
Vitaville. Pardon me, everybody. Pat and Tom Grusky, $25. Deborah Sturkin, $50 to purchase a bench honoring Pat and Tom Grusky. Parks and Recreation Sal Perez Scholarship Program, cash receipt dates June 27 through July 3rd, 2022, $13. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
What is the pleasure of council in regard to the gifts?
Move to accept said gifts with gratitude and appreciation.
Is there support?
Support.
Moved by Coronado, support by Airsource. Kathy, there, I believe just one correction. I don't think that's the correct spelling of Vitaville.
No, it's not. There's 2 V's.
There's-
Vita Veld. Yeah, isn't it Veld? Two?
It could be. I think we ought to make sure that we get that correct.
Vita Veld.
If you can't find it, I know that I can find it.
I know where, yeah.
Yeah. Any other discussion from council? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, communications from the city manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Handful of quick things tonight. One, appreciation. Thank you, Mayor. This week is a busy week. You see a lot of extra men and women and their families walking around town. We are the host city for the Michigan Municipal Executives. It's kind of the fancy name for the city and village and township and county managers from across the state of Michigan. So there's a good crew of them at the Hayworth Hotel this week and learning lots of things. And we're taking the opportunity to highlight a lot of the great things about Holland also. I think there's no shortage of 6 different presentations that are either solely or partially about the city of Holland. So that's very nice. Thank you, Mayor, for providing the welcome this morning. Many of you are going, and I think you have very thorough information from Cinca, so I know that there's the community exchange with Ludington, so I think that's time well spent, and I hope you enjoy that trip and learn some great things from another community, just like others are learning, hopefully, things from Holland this week. Steve, I probably should have said this just a minute ago. You'll hear more information about this, but we were very excited this week. Even though to some extent I know we're updating Udo, I actually give staff a lot of credit for, sometimes big projects or big documents go on a shelf and they, the saying is they collect dust. And we're certainly not doing that in this case where we're using it and putting it to work. And the Udo, thanks to the work of staff current and present, and planning commissioners current and present, and city council current and present, we just found out a couple days ago that it is being recognized for an award by the Michigan Association of Planners. So we'll be sharing more information on that, but that's a pretty high honor, and I think reflective of some great work and a great document. So you'll see more information about that, up to and including, a formal presentation and all those types of things at a planning conference. You also will be receiving an invitation. We also completed, Mark Cornelis was fantastic at shepherding us through the final stages of that, but we have been recognized as a redevelopment ready community by the MEDC. Which is a very important step and signifies, I think, what we're already been experiencing, which we are doing pretty well right now with development and redevelopment. So it's a recognition, I think, of a lot of standards and practices that we already had in place. But similar to audits or being accredited for different things, this was an important step. So you will continue to receive, but on Monday, August 22 at 9 a.m., we are going to formally be recognized by the state. They're going to come down and recognize that. And it's appropriate because it is about redevelopment, and when their entire crew came to visit Holland, they were very impressed, and they wanted specifically to have that press conference in one of our pocket parks and our alleyways. So that is why that press conference is being held in one of those alleyways right outside the Tulip Time offices along 8th Street. And then finally, just an explanation and an action that I'm proposing to take along with Dave Koster that really we have ability to do under our authorization, but really wanted to make sure that you were aware of it, and giving you the chance of if you had concerns about that. But we know that the state budget has been adopted, and it's a very unusual state budget in that with all of the federal funding, it has somewhere between $6 and $7 billion additional contained in it. And while the budget's been adopted, there's a supplemental bill process is what they describe it as. And before the close of lame duck at this legislative session, we know that really the three primary people within that process would be the governor and the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker, but also some very key appropriations committees. And there is going to be discussion, and there's going to be supplemental bills that assign for grants and other projects that $6 to $7 billion process. This is something that we've been aware of and preparing for. I think we're in many ways prepared for that with our grant manager position. But we also know that this process is what I'll call it just is what it is. It's a political process where there's some allocations and some decisions that will be made. And we were approached, and I think it's a good idea about the possibility of employing a lobbyist, for lack of a better word, basically to advocate for projects that we think would compete for those funds. So if those funds are going to be made available in supplemental bills, we definitely, just like when we did the grant manager position, if that money is available and it's going to go somewhere, we think it makes a lot of sense to be in the best position that we can compete for those dollars and bring those dollars back here. So we were approached. The company is ARM, and it's a sole employee. It's former state senator Arlen Meekoff, who knows that process very well. Dave and I met with him, and I think he's already been successful in securing some money through the first range of this process. Had a discussion about projects that, knowing the people that he knows and kind of the importance of the three sectors of government, both the governor's office and in the House and in the Senate, we think moving forward with a monthly contract to try to best position ourselves through that political process makes sense. It is a flat monthly fee. It would be a 6-month contract to be revisited at the end of those 6 months. We really think doing that sooner rather than later, because of the supplemental process that would end at this end of this legislative session, which is the end of this year. We think getting that in place sooner rather than later makes sense, and then we'd evaluate it at the end of the 6 months, not only from a staff perspective, but also kind of saying, hey, what were we delivered? Is that something that we'd want to bring back? It's a $2,500 a month contract that we think with the BPW and us, it would be split 50-50, at least initially. So that's something that both Dave and I think makes sense. It positions us well. If we're successful, quite frankly, in securing one project, it will more than pay back for itself. Administratively, just so you know how this happens, from a purchasing perspective, this would be kind of a traditional professional services type contract, which the purchasing manager has the ability to sign. And then for that dollar amount, that's a dollar amount that I have available to me within various budgets. And then it would just be a budget amendment that would come to you when we do those mid-year budget amendments. I definitely thought it important, though, where instead of just doing that, I wanted to very much let you know that that's something that both Dave and I think is a wise investment, and that we hope positions us well, and as I said a couple times already, would potentially bring us some funding for some projects. I think a lot of it is going to be infrastructure related, but there's other topics definitely that we want to go after, including but not limited to potentially broadband, depending on what happens on August 2, but also some additional projects, including affordable housing. So I'm informing you. Definitely, you can let me know what now, preferably, because otherwise we move forward with that if anyone sees an issue with that. But otherwise, that would be something that through our policies and procedures would be something that I would be able to do under my signature and Lynn's signature and Dave's signature. And that's all that I have tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. Quincy, you've got a question.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So this process that, I won't say this process, but this, what we're doing by getting someone to do this for us, is this something that other communities are doing?
Yeah, so for example, when I worked at Ottawa County chose to have a multi-client lobbyist. So you basically purchased a portion of a person to basically enter into that political process on your behalf. I'm not sure that that's something that makes sense for the city to have on an ongoing basis or not. I think I maybe heard rumors that there might have been points in time that the city maybe has had some of that in place. But I know that this is something that other communities, particularly right now because of that supplemental budget process and those monies that are available in the state, this is something that other communities are specifically taking a look at right now, to make sure that you raise and elevate and enter into that negotiation and debate process that sometimes happens, not necessarily out in fully public process, right? We want to make sure that we elevate and are putting our projects out there so that we can secure funding if it's appropriate.
Cool, thank you. I like the idea.
Mr. Corbin and then Mr. Peters.
Oh, good.
Okay, Mr. Peters first.
You mentioned, I think that's a very reasonable retainer for sure. You mentioned infrastructure, housing, $8 billion, something like that. How, of all the art of the possible of the things we could apply for in that way, you've mentioned a couple. Is there a discussion to be had among council about, well, we think about other things, or is there other grants that might be go after, or are we using his strength? Is he, given his history, is he going after, is he using his clout where he has the most influence that will influence the grants that we get? Or is there some other broader way to look at this? I mean, I heard housing, and there's one other thing I think that are a priority of ours, broadband. But I can think of 2 or 3 things that is a project, or if they qualified. I'm just wondering if there's a broader discussion that could be had. Maybe there's no time, I don't know, but it seems like there's a chance for some input here.
Yeah, it makes sense, Jay. What I would say is what we're responding to is what the state is saying, these are our priorities. So what's going to start happening, we believe, is that they're going to say, okay, we're interested in taking a look at projects that hit X, Y, or Z. So it's not priorities that we're making. It's lists, quite frankly, that we already have that you've prioritized either through the capital improvement, municipal capital improvement fund that we're all well aware of, or on the BPW side, infrastructure types things that I think probably are fit more with what I'll say, some of the excess funds that are in the state, in the state budget that are made available, they're flowing down from the federal government. So really what I would say, instead of us saying, hey, what projects do we want to try to get funding for? It's actually the other way around. It's really feds say, hey, this money can be used for these things. And then the state kind of goes through their process and they're going to say, okay, we're going to make this much money available for this and this and this. So what we're looking to do is make sure that we're aligning as much as possible as the state kind of starts filling those buckets, if you would, so that we have some projects ready to go that we've already, quite frankly, identified, that we can very quickly say, isn't that fantastic? We've got this project that we think matches your priority well, so please put us in consideration for some of that money.
Mr. Corbett?
Many of these firms represent multiple jurisdictions. Is this firm representing solely Holland, or are they representing multiple jurisdictions?
I think in the process right now, I think you're going to see maybe a small number of jurisdictions, probably in this general Ottawa-Allegan area, but not a large number. So I think this positions us well. Quite frankly, I think it's our best option. Did some thinking, obviously, whenever you do this, there's other firms that we could pursue to do this type of service. But I really think when you take a look at how recent he's been in this position, some of the appropriations chairs, quite frankly, that are going to be making these decisions, Dave and I both believe that this is our best option. And all in all, it's a pretty reasonable rate. Was interested to see if it would be like a percentage of or anything like that, which gets a little bit interesting sometimes. So I know I feel way more comfortable with just a flat fee.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nikki.
So there's no guarantee, but it does give us a better chance than just letting the money trickle down and we grab it.
I firmly believe that, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I guess I'd just add one more thing is, if not, we'd be using a lot of staff time to communicate our needs and applying for or trying to provide our argument to the state for our needs. So I think this is a reasonable expenditure so that we can represent the city and its residents very well. Thank you.
And I could do best on staff time, and the reality is I could spend a lot of time trying to get a very short conversation and may or may not even get the conversation. And I think in this case, you're getting someone that probably has access that just your staff doesn't have.
Great, thank you. Next item. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you. Yes, I think going with ARM and Arlen lobbying for our benefit would be great, and he knows the people, the game players, and his way around that area or the state. So thank you for both you and Dave for pursuing that and being advantageous for the city of Holland and its constituents. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Keith. Next item on the agenda, appointments and communications from the mayor. I just have one recommended appointment this evening. I would ask the council to please approve the reappointment of Michael Start to the International Relations Commission, the IRC, for his first full term, said full term expiring June 30 of 2025. I'd be looking for a motion in that regard.
Motion to approve Michael Start to his new appointment.
Moved by Coronado. Is there support? Support by Peters. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And I just have a couple of items tonight. One, Cathy, due to the miracle of technology, I've received from a very reliable source the spelling of the name Vidovell, and it's Vedovell. You're very welcome. And then the other, it was mentioned briefly by the city manager. There is a millage vote coming up on August 2 that is prior to our next regularly scheduled meeting. That's an item that, in regard to the broadband in the community, something that has been a high priority for this council as long as I've been on the council, and I believe that it was a high priority prior to my tenure on this council. Well thought out proposal. Well-researched proposal, one that this council supports. I would encourage our residents to get out and vote. If you have questions about that, we have a website that we've set up, hollandcityfiber.com, that they can go and get answers to their questions. We've had multiple public forums. I know that council members are versed in the proposal as well. The facts are out there, the numbers are out there, and it's been highly supported by the city council. And so I'm very hopeful personally that the people of the city of Holland will follow along with council's lead on this and make the commitment that this is something that's very important for our community, both in terms of our economic development, our kids, and ultimately the future of the city of Holland. And that is all that I have this evening. Next item on the agenda, appointments, motions, and communications from council members. Any communications from council members this evening? Seeing none, we move on to item 16A, text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance. Udo number 5. Mr. Van Beek, do you have a staff report again on this?
I believe it'd be good for my career to not go through the staff report again on this item.
All right, so this is a first reading of an ordinance. This puts it on the calendar for August 3rd. What is the pleasure of council in regard to putting text amendment group number 5 for the Unified Development Ordinance on the agenda for August 3rd? First reading today.
Move to place text Udo 5 on the agenda. Was that correct?
Or move it for first reading, close.
First reading,
Good,
please.
close enough.
Thank you.
Close enough. Moved by Coronado, is there support?
Support.
Support by Ernst. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Just one more motion I would entertain at this point. Moved by Vreeman. Is there support? Support by Peters. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate it.